Hello again, I'm Robert Fitton, and here we are again, doing the deep dive of the albums of 1983, going chronologically, rating and reviewing these, and we are in the month of August now, and I'm going to do something I've never done before, and something I've never seen anyone do before, and that is review a Bette Midler album. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? Are you sure? Okay, August 1st, 1983, she releases the album called No Frills, and this finds Bette Midler in kind of a valley, in her peaks and valleys of her career. She had done a great movie, The Rose, in 1979. Then after that, she had the stand-up comedy movie Divine Madness, both of those pretty successful. And then she releases a couple of movies that didn't do so well, like Jinxed in 82. And now it's 1983, and she's about to have a huge comeback in about 2 years when she signs up with Touchstone Pictures. She's in the movie Down and Out in Beverly Hills. That does really well, relaunches her career. After that, she's in one of my favorite movies of all time, Ruthless People, and it's just movie after movie, and her career, she's on like a 10-year high after that. But this is 1983, so it's kind of a dip, in her popularity. No Frills is the album. And it depends on what kind of Bette Midler you want, first of all. There's different Bette Midlers. There's the stand-up comedy. She's literally come out with stand-up comedy albums. There's the bold and brassy and gutsy Bette Midler like she was on the great soundtrack to The Rose, which I really like that. There's the adult contemporary light rock kind of Bette Midler that she does more in the late 80s, like the Beaches soundtrack, things like that. So, she's kind of all over the place. You never know what you're going to get with a Bette Midler album unless you know what you're getting beforehand. And so this one is a little bit of everything, but not really diving really into the deep waters on any kind of persona that she has. It's kind of, kind of low tide on everything. So it's not an incredible album by any stretch of the imagination. There's some nice tunes here and there. She does a cover of Beast of Burden, the Rolling Stones song. The Rolling Stones song is only like 5 years old at this point. So she's got that on there. I remember seeing the video for that when it was first out. Mick Jagger is in the video, and it's got a funny opening, And, I think, she's by the end of the video, she's pushing him around or whatever. He's strutting around with a robe on that says rock on the collar. I don't know why, but anyway, so that's on here. That's about as good as this album gets. She does a decent I'm not a big fan of cover songs anyway, but she does a decent version of that. That's the gutsy, brassy Bette Midler. That one's okay. She's got a couple of tunes on here that are listenable. It's like, all right, that's okay. The second song on here is really catchy, called Favorite Waste of Time. Another one, My Eye on You, is a little more interesting. Gutsy Bette kind of comes out a little bit on that one. She does an earlier version of All I Need to Know, which is a big light rock hit for Aaron Neville later on. That may be all I need to know. She does that one. Whatever on that. But piano ballad, that's another one. She does the really soft, kind of sad piano ballad. She does those really well. That's the final track on here. This one is Come Back Jimmy Dean, where she's just looking for that, that kind of character of a Jimmy Dean thing and wants him to come back. She's lonely, She does sad songs really well. She does a really great version of the John Prine Hello in There song. I don't know what album that's on. It's not on this one, but she really does this whole like emotional roller coaster on some of her earlier albums, where she goes from this comedy stuff that's like dirty and risque, and then goes right into this like sad, just like completely like heartstring pulling sad song about an old woman. So she is all over the place. This album reins it all in a little bit. It's got a little bit of 80s production going on. Nothing on here that's horrible. She doesn't go way into the light rock with the keyboards and whatever like she does later on, so that's good. Nice guitar on here. It's a pop rock kind of affair on a few of the tunes. I'm gonna give this 3 stars, I guess. Probably more of a 2-star album. I'm gonna give it 3 stars. I really like Bette Midler, especially her mid-80s stuff in movies and some of her comedy, and then a few of her earlier albums are pretty good. I love The Rose. So where's everybody going? So the Rose the movie, I mean. Rose the song is okay, I guess, as far as, the love ballad like that. Well written, well done. But, 3 stars for Bette Midler, no frills. So there, I've done it. This is probably going to... so far, this is the only album review of a Bette Midler album, I think, that's on YouTube. Unless you have, like, a Bette Midler fan that I'm not aware of that's reviewing all of her albums. And now it is August 2nd of 1983, and Jackson Browne is releasing Lawyers in Love. I'm pretty sure that Lawyers in Love, the song, was the first song I ever heard from Jackson Browne. Video was always on Friday night videos. Loved it. It was on the radio. Loved it. Loved it. I think that, if you grew up with Jackson Browne, or you were a younger person when in the 70s and you were listening to Jackson Browne and kind of went with his chronology, I think Lawyers in Love, a lot of people consider this, it's just one of his 80s albums. It's a throwaway. But like I said, it was the first time I ever heard of Jackson Browne. And then the single Tender as the Night, I don't know if that was before that or after it, but those two right around the same time. But I always loved the song Lawyers in Love. And listening to it again all these years later, still love it. Think it's brilliant. It really kind of encapsulates a lot of the 80s sort of culture that was going on at the time with the designer jeans and the yuppies and the me generation. A lot of the movies touched on that at the time, stand-up comedy and whatever. But if you weren't, it's kind of a thing that's been forgotten about. So if you weren't around and kind of knowing what was going on at the time, I only knew, I was a kid, so I only knew through TV shows and like I said, movies and whatever. So, you probably wouldn't understand a lot of that, but I think it really does a good job in kind of a sarcastic way of touching on all the different, the whole thing with the Cold War and sitting there with your TV tray watching Happy Days and, lawyers have a mating call. I just think it's brilliant. A 5-star song, certainly, but the rest of the album does not live up to that. Again, Jackson Browne, one of those people where, as far as his 80s stuff goes, you probably just need the songs on a good, 2 CD or long CD compilation or whatever. On the Day is... after that, It's Okay, Cut It Away, as he wants you to cut away his heart and the things that make him do these things and the things that make him long for the answers and, just cut it away. And Downtown is really kind of the first one that's just a total throwaway track to me. That's not even, going downtown and seeing all the different people and the different cultures and hearing the different languages and every kind of sound that a human can make. It's a nice sentiment, but it's not very well written for Jackson Browne standards. You want something a little more cutting or a little more observant or, putting his own spin on things. And it really sounds like a song that just about anybody could come out with. So, and then the 2 tracks on side 2, the Knock on Any Door, Say It Isn't True, are like that as well. So, Tender as the Night's a decent single. Lawyers in Love, like I said, that's probably one of my favorite Jackson Browne songs of all time. And then the album ends with For a Rocker, which is basically just this bar rocking kind of lighter bar, Heineken bar rocking song. Turn out the closed door, turn out the lights. We're gonna have a party tonight for a rocker. For a rocker. That type of thing. So it's okay. That probably would, I don't know if that was a single or not. I think it was played on, rock radio stations. So that would probably be on a compilation or two. So yeah, Jackson Browne's 80s stuff, you don't really need the whole album, you just need the certain songs. But definitely Lawyers in Love, like I said, great tune there. And this album, though, is decent. It's a 3-star album, I think. Maybe 3.5. I'm not doing half stars, but, it gets that little extra half for the song Lawyers in Love. But overall, a 3-star album from Jackson Browne. If you want to listen to a great Jackson Browne album all the way through, where every track is great, and there's great songwriting, really makes you think, really makes you appreciate well-written lyrics, you want to obviously go for something like, The Pretender or even Running on Empty or something like that. The legendary Pink Dots put out an album in '91 that I fell in love with, rated it pretty high. in my series from 1991. So I was really interested to see what their 1983 album sounded like. These guys have been out, since the 80s, since 1981 actually, when they came out with their debut. And then apparently in 1982, they put out 5 albums that year. So take that, King Gizzard. But in 1983, August the 4th, they released their album called Curse. And had never heard this before. It is the legendary Pink Dots. They've kind of got this neo-psychedelic thing going on. Like I said, really loved their 1991 album. The 1992 one was okay, not as great. So I was really interested to hear what this one would sound like. And it's completely different. This is more of an 80s feel to it, but they really do have their own sound in this. The psychedelic, if you want to call it that, sort of variety of this album is more of that whimsy, sort of childlike kind of feel. The vocals kind of remind me a little bit of one of my favorite UK bands, Kaleidoscope. They only had 2 albums out, but that's more of just kind of a... They don't really sound like them, but it's kind of the same sort of idea, I think, with lyrically. And of course, early Pink Floyd with like the childlike kind of nature of things. But the music is very minimal. You basically got a bass carrying a lot of the melody, a little bit of synth going on, not like, fluffy 80s keyboards, but more of a kind of a slight goth kind of thing. It's not, like frightening or ominous or anything, but just this kind of like almost whimsical in some places, especially the second track on here, Walpurgis Night. That's, very bouncy. Because the first song on here goes on for 6 minutes, and it's really just kind of like, man, where is this album going? It's not the best part of the album, the opener. But after that, like I said, you got the Walpurgis Night after that. Love Puppets, by the way, is the name of the first song. And there's a song on here called Lisa's Party, where Lisa throws a party, and all these things are happening, and, an actress gets upset because somebody guessed their age, and these other, people are getting upset, and, people are gossiping or whatever, and, all these wild things are happening. And then Lisa decides to make muffins and put cyanide in them and poison everyone. So everybody dies at the end. That's Lisa's Party. Glad I was not invited to that. There's also songs, whimsical about, waving at airplanes and dollhouses. You know how dollhouses can sometimes be kind of, if horror movies and whatever made about dollhouses, and, they can be kind of creepy or whatever. It's a little bit of creepiness here, just a little bit though. A little bit of psychedelic, little bit of creepiness, little bit of 80s vibe. It all mixes together, but it does continue in the same sort of palette for the entire album. Some tracks work better than others, but it doesn't really go in a wide spectrum of places. There's not a lot of variety here, so if you don't like the first 3 songs, you probably don't need to listen to the rest of the album. That's the one negative that I will put with this, is it doesn't venture off into adventurous lands. It stays in that realm the entire time. Ends with a song called Stoned Obituary, where, he keeps repeating, he died with his eyes on. I'm not sure about his boots, but he did die with his eyes on, reportedly. So I'm going to give this 3 stars because, like I said, it's somewhat interesting. I like the childlike psychedelic atmosphere going on. I do like some of the lyrics and some of the songs. They set up nice little scenarios, but some of the songs don't work as well. And there's a couple of tracks on here where it's just nonsensical lyrics. I try to figure out, what language is this? I don't think it is a language. I think it's just made up stuff. 2 of those in a row. So yeah, a good 3-star album from the legendary Pink Dots called Curse. August 8th, 1983, it's time to talk about Rick James, bitch! He had an album out called Cold Blooded. Now, I like some Rick James. And this one's alright, but it seems to be lacking a little something. It just kind of seems kind of pedestrian at this point. It's got the usual Rick James kind of funk going on, heavy synths, some horn action in there, some guest stars. He's got Smokey Robinson helping him out on this ballad called Ebony Eyes, which was actually a single. He's got Grandmaster Flash on one of the highlights on this album called Pimp the Simp. All about this prostitute that had a pimp. She ended up dead in a hotel in her underwear. I mean, he really paints a picture in that song. But yeah, so, you know, that's an actual highlight. There's another song called Doing It, which I'm not sure what the it is that they're doing. They might be painting a house or something like, I don't know, they're doing it. But that one's got a nice melody to it, and it's kind of another standout track. Most of it, though, is this really bare bones, you know, you got the drum machine, you got the synths, you got the horns doing blasts, and you got him either singing in his operatic voice like this, like he's trying to be, you've either got that or his funky kind of downtown, you know, grit going on. But we've heard it all before. He doesn't really go anywhere new on this. I definitely prefer his 70s stuff, which is kind of in the same vein, but it's a little more raw. It's a little more, you know, kind of, you know, feeling his way around, you know, type of thing. This is like a little bit too like phoned in for me, some of these songs, especially the title track, like Cold Blooded. I never really cared for that one. I've had several Rick James compilations back in the 80s kind of start me on my Rick James journey. That song was always on those. And because there was a compilation that followed this album called Reflections that I got when it first came out, and that's on there. And that was always a skippable track. That's the title track on here. You've got Tell Me What You Want, the slow jam thing that features none other than a guest vocal. It's a speaking vocal from Billy D. Williams. You damn right. So that is on here as well. And a song about a menage a trois. He's got two girls that he just loves so much. He doesn't know what he's going to do. Now, there's plenty of songs like that, you know, where a guy is torn between two lovers. Actually, that's a woman that's torn. That's Mary McGregor. But there's a lot of guys in songs that have the two women. They don't know which one they're going to choose. The Monkees had a song like that called Look Out, Here Comes Tomorrow. But Rick James has a song like that. And his solution, let's have a three-way. Yeah, it's called 1, 2, 3, because he's counting them up. You, her, and me. 1, 2, 3. Let's have a menage a trois. He does a whole thing in French on that. You Bring Out the Freak in Me as the opening track. It's just kind of generic kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's Rick James. You can't really go completely wrong with a Rick James album. So I'm going to give this 3 stars. But it is a little bit, seems a little phoned in at this point. And I'm deciding whether I should tell you my Rick James story or not. Okay. So I never encountered Rick James, so this isn't a story about me and Rick James. This is just a story I heard. So allegedly, okay, we're going to do allegedly here, because I heard this from somebody. So Rick James, of course, is on the Gordy label, which is a part of Motown, right? So he is in one of the top brasses of Motown's office, right? And this album has either just come out or is about to come out or something. It's 1983. And he waltzes in there with a big bag of some sort of white powder. He is apparently high as a fucking kite and just throws the bag down on the desk of the guy, you know, whose office it is. White powder goes everywhere. He starts going off about how he wants $250,000 or $100,000 or whatever it is, and blah, blah. I'm Rick James, and blah, 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 blah. Allegedly, this all happened allegedly, according to someone else, but I've never heard this story anywhere else. And he's just going off, bouncing off the walls. White powder's everywhere. He eventually gets done yelling or whatever he's doing and storms out. And because there was another person in the room, apparently. So one of the top brass of Motown just picks up the phone and says, yeah, forget about Rick James. We're putting everything on Lionel Richie. Next thing you know, Lionel Richie's got an album with like 7 hit singles on it. Rick James has Cold Blooded. Great cover art, though. Love that cover art. But yeah, Rick James. Cold Blooded. It's all right. Elvis Costello is one of those names I used to hear all the time, especially in things like TV shows, like situation comedies where there were young people, square pegs, and the facts of life and things like that, where somebody would say something about Elvis. I'm going to the Elvis concert tonight. An older person would be like, Elvis? He's dead. No, Elvis Costello, laugh track. And the name's always stuck out to me because, his name is Elvis. But I never heard any of his music until 1983 when Friday Night Videos used to play Every Day I Write the Book. It would come on the radio every once in a great while, but it was mostly the video, which featured, Prince Charles and Lady Diana, and they were, or lookalikes, when they were having, like a domestic situation or whatever, where they were just like average people. I think that's what the video was anyway, but yeah, so that was my introduction to the actual sound of Elvis Costello, and that song appears on the album that was released on August 5th, 1983, called Punch the Clock. And I had never heard this all the way through. I'm familiar with several earlier Elvis Costello albums. I have several earlier Elvis Costello albums, but not this one. And I really like a lot of his earlier stuff. It's a little more punky, a little more new wave, a little more cutting edge, however you want to describe it. This one is a little more mainstream sound to it, I guess. A little more going for the top 40. A little bit of a watered down. Doesn't have quite that bite in the music. The TKO horns appear on this, so it does have a lot of horns, a lot of horn stabs, upbeat kind of horns, with the exception of the song Shipbuilding, which is a little slower. But, so it's got the TKO horns. It's got a song called TKO, Boxing Day, all about a couple that's going through some rough times, both mentally and physically, apparently. So that's an interesting thing to write about. Very upbeat song, though. We're dancing along to the domestic dispute, and that's a theme that happens quite a bit on other Elvis Costello songs too. The harrowing lyrics but the music's going along and bopping along like, hey, woohoo, pogo. But yeah, Every Day I Write the Book is on here. That song I always thought was okay. I thought the video was more interesting, and there definitely are more interesting tracks on this album too. A lot of it has more, like I said, more of a mainstream pop kind of horn-oriented, kind of bouncing around kind of sound, but songs like Pills and Soap, that comes towards the end of the album, all about animal abuse and how animals are mistreated and then used to make things like pills and soap, apparently. When I first heard it, and I'm hearing these lyrics, I originally thought it was about something else, which is horrible as well. But no, it's about animal abuse and the way that is sanctioned. And I think Elvis Costello actually became a vegetarian after learning about how animals are abused to make pills and soap and other things and makeup testing and whatever the horrible shit that goes on. But so yeah, there's that, and then you get that. My mind is thinking about it, and I'm getting really sad, and all this imagery is coming up, and then of course right after that, the track that closes the album is all upbeat, and you're bouncing around again. So it's this emotional roller coaster of lyrics and music that contradict each other, and song sequence that is just like wow, like bipolar, ripping you back and forth, and so it is quite the musical journey on this album. But I always say, I love albums that have a lot of variety and take you on a kind of a journey rather than just the same thing over and over again. And this album definitely does that. Most of the tracks here deal with kind of observational situation where he's kind of looking at another couple that are going through bad times or a breakup or something, or he himself is in a relationship that's going south. There's all kinds of tracks on here like that, but there are some deviations from, like I said, Pills and Soap, Shipbuilding, and Charm School, another standout track on here, all about, did you learn to be so cruel in Charm School, and kind of like, the contradiction of that, of you're supposed to be going here to learn how to be charming and a better person and, a nice installation into society that brightens everyone's day. But really what you're learning is how to be a social climber, as they used to call them, and how to use people as stepping stones and be rude and cruel and all that kind of stuff. So it is an interesting album. I'm going to give this 4 stars. I do prefer other Elvis Costello albums more, but if I ever see this for $5 or something like that, this is an album I'd pick up. It does, like I said, have a little more of a mainstream pop sound than a lot of the Elvis Costello albums that come earlier, and it can't really be judged by its big single, Every Day I Write the Book. I don't know about in the UK what songs are hit singles from him, but in the US, I think that was his first one that was like all over pop radio. I know Watching the Detectives was always a favorite, but I don't really, and Allison, but I don't think those are really big, like top 40 hits. I think those were more like you just had to know about them, and they were, for the new wave kind of audience at the time. So 4 stars for Elvis Costello and the Attractions, can't forget the Attractions, and Punch the Clock. It's August 8th, 1983, and Billy Joel is an innocent man. And this is his album that just came out. This is the half-speed mastered version of this album, so it sounds just terrific. But yeah, this is an album that a lot of Billy Joel fans don't really like a lot. This is, I will say, this is not The Stranger. You know, this is his 80s, very poppy, very hit-oriented videos all over MTV and Friday Night Videos. And this is his salute to sort of, 50s and early 60s rock and roll. I have heard a lot of places, I've seen people talk about how this is his salute to the Four Seasons. I think it's way beyond that. I mean, this has doo-wop on it. It does have that sort of New York 60s thing going on. But, I think when most people think of the Four Seasons, they think of Frankie Valli's singing style. The Sherry baby, that type of thing. And there'll be none of that on here. Although, he does say time like that. Time in, New York, or in Uptown Girl. But yeah, I don't mind this. This is fun. If you're going to do a salute to the music that inspired you and that you kind of grew up with, I'm so much more glad that he did this than just do a covers album. I'm just going to do a covers album. I'm just going to cover a bunch of songs that are well-loved and well-known, and everybody loves the original version. Not only the lyrics, but also the vocal and the instrumentation and how it's produced and the memories it brings back. Yeah, I'm going to do those songs in my own style. Fuck that. Not into covers albums. I'm really glad that he was able to take that sound, take that style, take that whole feeling, the whole spirit, really, and do his own songs with it, and I think he completely pulled it off. Like I said, is this The Stranger? No. Is this 52nd Street? No. This is An Innocent Man. This is a totally different thing. But I think from what he was trying to do, he did a really fantastic job with it and actually got really big hit songs out of it that are still played today. You have now this nostalgia for 80s nostalgia that was based on early 60s nostalgia. So, we just keep repeating. We are on a loop. But yeah, Uptown Girl, like I said, that is definitely on here. So is Tell Her About It. Fun videos for both of those songs. There's like 6 singles on here. Keeping the Faith, talking about his old man Trojans. Did that get on MTV? I don't remember if that actually got in the video. I think it did when it was on Friday Night Videos. But yeah, for the longest time, the whole acapella thing. I read somewhere that was I read this a long time ago, so I could be misremembering this. But from what I remember, that's the first acapella song to ever hit the top 40 in like decades. Because there's literally no instruments on that song except for maybe like an upright bass or something like that. So yeah, An Innocent Man, you get a little more kind of a light rock feel mixed in with the 50s kind of jive on that one. I'm not above making up for the love, that kind of thing. This album actually starts off kind of slow because the first couple of tracks after Easy Money, and I'll get to that one, you have An Innocent Man, The Longest Time, and This Night, which are kind of like secondary tracks to me. Then the fire hits with Tell Her About It and Uptown Girl, and even the song Christy Lee is really cool. I think that probably could have been a single too. I wonder who that's about. But yeah, about this saxophone player that loves this Christy Lee, and he only hits the high notes for her because she's a great little piece of music. That's what he says in the song. The album starts off with Easy Money, which this is one of those songs where almost every one of these songs would be recognizable to somebody who has even never heard this album before, because there's so many of them are hit singles. But that one might be recognizable, not because it's a big single, because it was used in the movie Easy Money with Rodney Dangerfield. And so, terrific movie from the early 80s, definitely an 80s movie. If you haven't seen that in a long time, check that out again. I don't know where you can stream that. But yeah, Easy Money. So even with all these hit singles, they even have a song on here that you can recognize as a 80s movie theme. So all in all, this is a 4-star album. I think he absolutely nails what he's trying to do. A few of the songs on here did get a little, overplayed, but that's not the song's fault. I have heard some of these songs quite a lot over the years, and it's kind of like I'm hearing them now, and I'm like, oh, okay. Kind of the magic's kind of worn off at this point. But overall, this album is great for Billy Joel fans that, want an album that doesn't take itself quite so seriously, but still has a lot of talent involved. It's just a lot of fun. And like I said, he's doing his thing, trying to go back to his roots. And I would much rather hear this than just another boring, bland covers album. On August 8th, 1983, the band The Chameleons released their album called Script of the Bridge. It was their debut, and it's another one of those albums that are different in the US than they are in the UK, and another one of those bands that have UK at the end of their name in the US. They are the Chameleons UK. Here, no, I'm not talking about the Charlatans UK, that's a different thing, but I'm sure there's another Chameleons somewhere in the US, and that's why they have to be called the Chameleons UK. The songs are in completely different order on the US version, and it's also a shorter album because instead of 12 songs, there are only 8. So little Beatles revolver action going on this one. 57 minutes, nope. This one is 20 minutes shorter. So I listened to the US one. That's the one I decided to listen to because if it was 1983 and, living here in the United States, I would probably have had access to that one. So it actually starts off with the song Up the Down Escalator. Something's wrong here, boys, and it's all about the struggle. Not the struggle literally of going up a down escalator. I think that's a metaphor. But, just getting tossed to scraps and you're trying to get through life and just getting shit on. Jesus Christ, as they say in the song. So after Up the Down Escalator, As High as You Can Go is next. So they put those two songs next to each other. I don't know, to try to maybe keep the trend going. That one says boys over and over too. I think it's single file boys. So a lot of, talking to boys a lot in the first two songs. But yeah, I guess you're going up a down escalator and then as high as you can go, which probably isn't very high. But yeah, so the whole overall sound of this album has that kind of very layered music with the guitars that just play chords that change, like do 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 do. It's that kind of thing throughout most of the album. So they're called the Chameleons, but they don't change very much. It is a nice sound, especially for 1983. A little break from the synth pop and the punk rock and the stuff like that. So yeah, it sounds a little more like later 80s, but it is a kind of a Cure kind of sound a little bit in there. But yeah, some nice guitar work, but it is a lot of chords and a lot of just the keeping the beat with the guitar. So yeah, the Chameleons UK, Script of the Bridge, 8 songs, and some of the standouts are the first couple. Another track on here that stands out, A Person Isn't Safe Anywhere These Days, and that's, Superman is just standing there laughing in the rain. Actually, it's the Man of Steel. I'm assuming that's Superman. I don't know if Marvel's ever done a movie like that where, Gotham City is just falling apart and Superman's just laughing in the rain. But yeah, I found it interesting that a couple of the songs on the UK blend together. I'm pretty sure that's Monkeyland and Thursday's Child. They're separated here, so there's a fade out and sort of a fade in later on. Why don't they just keep those two songs together? I don't understand the reordering, and I get that it's shorter because, artistic intent. This is America! But I don't get, keeping two songs on the album and then pulling them apart, that they naturally overlap. Anyway. Last song, Second Skin, is a nice closer, 6.5 minutes or so, and it feels like I'm floating on air, and it kind of does, because it has that kind of free-flowing kind of, the whole album, like I said, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, it keeps going in that song as well, so not a very diverse sound, but a decent sound, and it's a great, well recorded and everything, and I enjoyed it. So I'm going to give this 4 stars. I'm not sure if I would have done that. Maybe if it was 4 more songs like this, I think it might have worn out its welcome a little bit. So maybe the US had the right idea to trim this up a little bit. Who knows? I don't, because I've never heard the UK one. But yeah, so yeah, the Chameleons UK, or I'm sure that the American version isn't even really available anymore. I'm sure if you got this on CD or a reissue, it's probably the original 12-song version. So we'll just call them Chameleons. And yeah, 4 stars for this one. So now it's August 9th, 1983, and the Animals are back together again. Yay! This is the second time they have tried to reunite and make something happen, and it really didn't. But what did happen was an album called Arc, released on this day. And so, yeah, this is the Animals trying to do sort of the post-punk thing that a lot of the bands were trying to do then. The Kinks, for example, they had this sound, kind of adopted it in the late 70s, early 80s. I already talked about their State of Confusion album, where they kind of have this sound, especially on the first couple of songs. But the Kinks are obviously much, much better than the Animals. If I was going to make a list of the mid-60s bands from the UK that were successful in the US. You know, you've got obviously the Beatles, Rolling Stones, The Who, the Kinks, the Yardbirds, Small Faces, whoever. The Animals would be at the very bottom of the list. I am not a fan of Eric Burdon's voice at all. I've always thought he kind of sounded like a hack. You know, like somebody on karaoke night trying to sing the blues, or especially when he tries to be soulful, it's just kind of ridiculous. And so, not a fan, especially, I mean, and it's the kind of thing that creeps up on you. You like listening to the Animals, they come on the radio or whatever, they got that handful of hits, and you're like, okay, what? And then over time you're like, man, this guy really cannot sing. He's just yelling everything. Which, you know, yelling is fine sometimes, if that's appropriate. You punk rock and whatever, and hard rock's, but this guy just, I don't know, there's something about his, he just sounds like a hack. It's the best way I can describe it. Especially when you hear some of their album tracks that weren't hits, then it becomes crystal clear. It's like, this guy's not really that talented. He just got lucky, I think, a few times. Like House of the Rising Sun. That's a perfect example, because that is a song that literally went to court to try to find out what the main ingredient that made that a big song was, and it turns out, of course, it's Alan Price's organ. So, you know, ouch. You know, they went to court for like songwriting or publishing rights or whatever, and everybody decided, yeah, that's the organ in that song that made that a hit. You know, that one, the organ, of course, the sound of that's okay. I always like that. We Got to Get Out of This Place, pretty cool. But that's because it's a well-written song and it's for the times, and, you know, just the whole lyrics and the theme of the song, terrific. That's a Cynthia Weil Barry Mann song, by the way. The Animals did not write that. And, you know, Spill the Wine is great because of War, you know, the band playing and their chops, you know, they're making it happen. I don't really care about Eric Burdon's rattling on about some dream he had or whatever. So, you know, I think all the good Animals songs are good not because of Eric Burdon, but in spite of him. Album tracks like The Ballad of Bo Diddley, have you heard that? Wow. That goes beyond bad. That Eric Burdon should be ashamed of himself. That is, and even Bo Diddley heard it and they're playing it for him and he's like, this is awful. Ouch. And now that is all in the past. We're in 1983. They're trying to update their sound. Like I said, kind of a post-punk type of thing. He's just yelling. And the music is not very imaginative. It's just kind of bashed out. The band obviously is competent. It's the Animals. They're all back together again, including Alan Price, Chaz Chandler, you know, the whole gang. But, you know, a bad album. A bad lead vocalist. It starts off with a song called Loose Change, all about, you know, again, Eric Burdon's the working man. He's down there with the blue collar. He's just a bartender getting loose change. And, you know, okay. After that, you get the obligatory reggae-tinged 80s song. That one's next. And the rest of this on here, you know, there's little highlights musically, like Being There is kind of cool, music-wise. But, again, Eric Burdon's vocal ruins it. And they do a cover of Elvis Presley's Trying to Get to You. It's this slow kind of bluesy kind of thing, where Elvis Presley actually has a slow version of that, which shows up on some albums as, you know, the previously unreleased version or whatever. But they don't do it well. You know, you got the single off of this was called The Night, which I remember hearing that. And I had that on a tape, Hot Tracks, you know, one of those K-Tel tapes, but I still don't remember it. And so I'm listening to it, and here come the cheesy 80s synths, you know, and Eric Burdon yelling again, bellowing, and not in a very convincing way. I guess that's one thing about his vocals. He's not very convincing. You know, he just comes off as, like I said, like this hack kind of guy who's maybe a little drunk in the bar, and you just can't wait for him to get off the stage and the next singer to come on. Obviously, I'm not a fan of Eric Burdon, really. And like I said, it took a little while for me to realize that. Like, this guy is not good. And the album's not good. This doesn't even have any hits on it. The Night didn't really do anything. You know, Alan Price, with that beautiful organ sound of the 60s, just incredible on House of the Rising Sun. That's not here. It's been replaced by the 80s synths. And they don't really do too much with them. It's kind of like a paint-by-numbers version of post-punk. You know, it's like, let's make sure we check all the boxes. New wave here. Okay, we got the reggae song. We got the, you know, we got the cover of the old 50s song. We got the, yelling and whatever. We got the kind of bashing away, you know, music sound. We got the 80s synths, you know. We're on IRS records, you know, check. You know, so no, 1 star. Don't like it. Don't really like the Animals, mostly because of Eric Burdon. And I don't ever need to hear anything off of this again. It doesn't even have, you know, like there's these pretty bad albums that always have like the one song. Well, the one song though, you know, I'm going to give it 2 stars because at least the 1 or 2 songs on here, this doesn't even have that. 1 star. Done with the Animals and done with this video. So next, coming up, woo, it gets a lot better. I'm going to talk about albums from Cheap Trick, Asia, and a bunch more. So hopefully you'll join me for that one as we continue the deep dive into the not the 1980s, to 1983 specifically. And a whole lot of albums. Great ones, good ones, ones that I'm blown away by, never heard it before, ones that I've heard many, many times and are revisiting, and then shitty albums like the one I just talked about from the Animals. So hopefully you'll join me for all of that. This roller coaster of reviews in 1983. I'm Robert Fithen. Thank you so much for watching. I will hopefully talk to you again in the next one.